Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. Today we're going to be talking about the Canadian private sponsorship scheme, and I'm going to jump right into that immediately. Each year, millions of people around the world are forced to flee their homes to escape persecution, war, and severe human rights abuses. And if you're interested to learn more about forced migration in general, facts, figures, numbers, you can check out my videos on that here. But the cold reality is that many people are forced to flee their homes and they are not able to return or to settle in the country that they immediately fled to in the first place. So that means that resettlement is one of the few options that refugees often have. So I have another video that talks about durable solutions for refugees and also why those aren't working. You can check that out here and I'll link it in the description below. But today I'm going to talk about the system in Canada because Canada has a much more innovative system for taking in refugees than many other countries in the world. Many of these people that I've been talking about are really displaced all over the world. They're not able to return home. The government of Canada has decided that it will provide assistance to displaced people every year through the government-assisted refugee program. So there are several countries around the world, Canada, but also others like Sweden and the United States, who agree every year to take in a certain number of refugees that need to be resettled. Now, where Canada is a bit different than many other countries in the world is that they have the government-sponsored program, but they also allow private citizens and organizations to also sponsor refugees or refugee families, and that allows even more refugees to be brought to Canada. And it really is a way, it's a mechanism that shows if there's will within Canadian society to also sponsor and help these people integrate, then they're willing to take in many more refugees. So this is a really interesting, very interesting program that Canada has. Canadian citizens and permanent residents are able to provide additional opportunities then for refugees living abroad to find protection and build a new life in Canada through the private sponsorship of refugees program. Canada's private sponsorship program is actually the oldest in the world, and some other countries have also started to take cues from Canada on this. Their program began back in 1978 to respond to the forced displacement crisis in Southeast Asia following the American War in Vietnam. So since the program began, more than 300,000 refugees have been sponsored. So Canada has taken in even more refugees, but over 300,000 have been sponsored by private organizations and private citizens to come to Canada. And of course, that means that there have likely been many more than 1 million ordinary Canadians involved in many of these initiatives. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about how the private sponsorship system works, who can be sponsored, the obligations that are involved, the application process. And in another video, I will also look at some other programs that are available in other countries and see how they may be compared to the Canadian system. In this graph, you can actually see the difference between you can see the total number of refugees settled in Canada between 1979 and 2019. But what you can also see very interestingly is the government-assisted refugees. So those are the refugees the government directly resettles to Canada. And then in the purple, you see the private sponsorship scheme. So you see that in some years, there are a lot of private citizens and organizations that agree to sponsor people. And you can see, for instance, in 2015, 2017, 2019, and 18, in general, there's been even more private sponsorship than there has been the government assistance. So this is a really interesting way of allowing refugees to come into the country. The private sponsorship program is strictly for sponsoring refugees and persons in refugee-like situations. So under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations, persons who may qualify as refugees for Canada's Refugee Humanitarian Resettlement Program are grouped into two main categories or classes. One is the convention refugees abroad, and the other one is the country of asylum. And I'll explain each of these in turn. So if we first look at the convention refugee, this is for any person who by reasons of a well-founded fear of persecution because of race, religion, nationality, and membership in a particular social group or political opinion is outside of their country of nationality and is unable to, or because of reasons of fear, unwilling to avail themselves of the protection of those countries. So basically meaning someone can't go back to their country because they're, concerned about their security. Now, this person also would then not have the country of nationality of Canada, and is then outside of their formal habitual residence and is unable, because of reasons of fear, or unwilling to return to their country, and is also outside of Canada at that time. The person then is also seeking resettlement in Canada, and the person also the person needs to basically not have a prospect for another durable solution. So again, if you're interested in what durable solutions are, you can check out my video on that. But it's not just that they don't have access to a durable solution, it's that they don't have access to another durable solution within a reasonable period of time. So that means basically that they can't return to their country of nationality, or habitual residence, that they can't integrate into the country that they're currently in, or the country of first asylum. That usually has to do with the policies in that country that they first moved to. And they don't have another offer of resettlement from a country other than Canada. So if they fit all of those criteria, then they can come in under the Convention Refugee. And this is really based on the International Geneva Convention or International Refugee Convention. Then you have also a member of a country of asylum class. And this is a person who is outside of their country of nationality or habitual residence, and they have been or continue to be seriously and personally affected by civil war, armed conflict, or a massive violation of human rights in their countries. And they don't have prospects of any of the durable solutions that we talked about in a reasonable period of time. So people can come in under these two categories. Now, an officer of the Overseas Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada office, or the IRCC, makes the final decision on whether someone meets one of these definitions and is eligible for resettlement. And the eligibility decision is normally based on an interview with the applicant, supporting documentation submitted by the applicant, and a sponsoring group, and additional information available to the officer, such as, for example, the situation in the country that they are fleeing from. So to be accepted for resettlement in Canada in general, the refugee must pass a medical security and admissibility check. So in addition, the refugees also will be assessed based on their ability to establish successfully in Canada. So in making this assessment, the migration officer considers whether the refugee has relatives or a sponsor in Canada, the ability to speak or learn to speak English or French, and the potential for employment and resourcefulness in the country. Now, when a family unit is applying for refugee status or for resettlement, the settlement potential of all of the family members is assessed as a single determination, so not individually. Now, of course, there are many conditions under which someone does not qualify for resettlement. So if the person is already in Canada, or a person seeking Canada's protection, so basically if a person is already in Canada, then they're not eligible for resettlement. They can directly apply for asylum, and then they'll go through the status determination process in Canada. Also, if their previous sponsorship applications were refused, they're also not allowed to go through this program unless their circumstances have changed, or there's no new information that wasn't provided in the previous application, or Canadian laws affecting the case have changed, or people who fled persecution or civil war some time ago but now can integrate into the country where they're residing or can return home safely. So this would make someone ineligible for the private sponsorship scheme. So who can actually sponsor a refugee? I think that's a very important question. So you have basically sponsorship agreement holders, and these are incorporated organizations that have signed a formal sponsorship agreement with the IRCC. And many of these are religious organizations or ethnocultural groups or humanitarian organizations. They can either be at the local or regional or national level. So these organizations then assume overall responsibility for the management and sponsorship under their agreement. And organizations entering into the sponsorship agreement generally submit several refugee sponsorships per year. So they are, doing this on a regular basis. But since 2012, the Canadian government has capped the number of refugees that a sponsorship agreement holder can sponsor each year. So these organizations do have a limited number of people that they're allowed to sponsor every year. For example, in 2021, the sponsorship allocation was set at 12,500 refugees. And this allocation is divided between all of the sponsorship agreement holders. Now, there are other groups that can also sponsor refugees. So one are the constituent groups, and a sponsorship agreement holder can actually authorize constituent groups to sponsor under its agreement and provide support for the refugees. So each of the sponsorship agreement holders sets their own criteria for recognizing these constituent groups, and they are generally based in the sponsored refugees' expected community of settlement and must have their sponsorship application plan approved and signed by the sponsorship agreement holder before they can submit their documentation to the Resettlement Operations Center in Ottawa. So another group that can sponsor refugees is called Groups of Five. So these are 5 or more Canadian citizens or permanent residents who are at least 18 years of age, live in the expected community of settlement, and have collectively arranged for the sponsorship of a refugee living abroad. And these individuals basically act as guarantors that will necessitate the support and will provide. They will provide support to the refugee during the full duration of the sponsorship. The Resettlement Operations Center in Ottawa assesses actually the individual contributions of the group members to the sponsorship, and the financial and non-financial aspects are considered collectively, as well as the settlement plan before the sponsorship is approved. Now, there are also community sponsors, and this is any organization, association, or corporation located in the community where the refugees are expected to settle. And they can basically make an organizational commitment to sponsor a refugee. So they must also undergo financial and settlement plan assessments by the Refugee Operations Center in Ottawa each time they want to sponsor someone. As part of the application package, the sponsoring group will need to include proof that each applicant has been recognized as a refugee by the UNHCR or a foreign state before they are allowed to come through this program. So important points here with regard to the sponsors is that sponsor groups need to agree to provide the refugees with care and lodging, settlement assistance and support for the duration of the sponsorship period. Normally, this is 12 months starting from the refugee's arrival in Canada or until the refugee becomes self-sufficient, and that's whichever comes first. Now, sometimes it is necessary, or the migration officers will determine that the refugees require more time to become established in Canada and will ask the sponsoring group to extend the sponsorship period to a maximum of 36 months. Now, the sponsoring group has the option of refusing the request for an extension of the sponsorship period, but the sponsorship group risks having the case refused as a result. Now, private sponsors normally support sponsored refugees in a number of ways. So it's providing the cost of food, rent, and household utilities and other day-to-day living expenses. They are generally providing clothing, furniture, and other household goods. locating interpreters if those are necessary, so helping them with finding a family physician and dentist, assisting with applying for the provincial healthcare coverage. They also help with enrolling children in school and adults in language training. They also help with introducing newcomers to people with similar interests, so basically helping them with their network. They also provide orientation with regard to everyday activities such as banking services and transportation, and they also generally help them in search of employment. So it's really a full service help with regard to integration in the country. Now, there are two ways that a sponsoring group can identify a refugee to sponsor, right? So they want to sponsor someone, but they have to find that person or family to sponsor. So the first way is that they can be sponsor referred. So that means that the sponsoring group submits the name of a refugee or a refugee family that it is interested in sponsoring, and the group may have obtained the referral from an overseas contact, a friend, a community member, a relative of a member of an organization, or elsewhere. And so both the other groups and like the groups of 5 and the community groups can submit the sponsorship application also on behalf of the sponsor referred refugee to the ROC-O. So for instance, if a group that wishes to refer a refugee applicant for sponsorship, then they actually need to first consider whether or not the person is likely to be eligible for the private sponsorship scheme. Because of course ineligible applicants will be refused. So they need to kind of do their due diligence there first. So the second way that this can happen is through the blended visa office referred, basically through a referral from the visa office. So basically the ROC that administers an inventory of cases that have been selected after initial identification by the UNHCR. So the IRRC then works to find a private sponsor to match with the refugee under this kind of blended visa office referred or the visa office referred programs. So these are where they already know people who are in need of resettlement. So they already have a caseload, and then one of the sponsors can actually just come there and find someone who would be immediately eligible. So for sponsor referred cases, there can be considerable time that can pass between the time an application is made and the time the refugees arrive in Canada. So the selection process for these refugees can fluctuate with the volume of applications received at the overseas IRRC offices. Now, for the blended visa office referred or the other, visa office referred cases, these refugees are usually travel ready. They can go immediately by the time the match has been made. Also with the private sponsor group in Canada, it's usually between 1 and 4 months for this to all get approved. So this is a much faster process. So there are some, other things that refugees also have access to when they are being resettled. So as far as coverage of healthcare costs goes, this is depending on the province of destination, but the waiting period for the provincial health insurance coverage can be as much as 90 days for new permanent residents. However, in most jurisdictions, resettled refugees may be eligible from their initial day of arrival, and privately sponsored refugees should apply for the provincial or territorial health insurance as soon as possible. And now when it comes to the interim federal health program, this provides limited temporary coverage of healthcare benefits for specific groups of people in Canada until they can become eligible for the provincial or territorial health insurance. The interim federal health program is really a payer of last resort. It's limiting benefits to those who lack public health insurance or comprehensive private insurance. Now, all resettled refugees, including privately sponsored refugees, are eligible for basic, supplemental, and prescription drug coverage under the interim federal health program. And this comes with, different kinds of coverages. Now, additionally, many people are also eligible for the Canada Child Benefit. So most resettled refugee parents with children under the age of 18 qualify for a monthly payment to help them with the cost of raising their children. And additionally, they are eligible for a permanent residence card. So all new permanent residents in Canada receive a permanent residence card, and these cards are valid for 5 years. So basically, if someone is accepted into Canada through the private sponsorship system, the migrant can become a resident upon arrival in Canada and then has access to this permanent residency. This is really a very interesting program that Canada has, not only having the government sponsorship, but also this private sponsorship system. And this allows for citizens to take a very active role in not only the resettlement, but also the integration of refugees. It is absolutely a model that a lot more countries should be looking to as a really great way to be able to resettle more refugees that are absolutely in need, with a very participatory approach from local citizens. So in a next video, I will look at other countries who are starting or have started private sponsorship systems, and we'll have a look at what they are doing. If you like this video, please do like it, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos that I upload every week. And of course, if you have had any experience with this Canadian private sponsorship scheme, please give us some comments down below. Tell us how it was for you. Tell us if you were a sponsor or someone who was sponsored through the program. We'd love to hear more about your experiences. And I do hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.